Good evening and welcome back to a brand new edition of the Social Confoes podcast. It's lucky number 13 and I'm joined again with our favorite host, Diego. Diego, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, well rested from the weekend. Well, rested kind of, but it was an enjoyable weekend.
Good to hear. It's like the quality of your setup keeps going up
Yeah,
every
you
week.
notice the light?
Yes, I'm feeling like something. I have to do something with the green screen. I might have to redecorate the whole thing and put in lights and make it a little bit more that I can keep up with my co-host. But we have another great episode tonight with another great
Definitely.
guest,
Yeah.
and I've only heard of him. I've seen his name so many times. We've of course connected, interest in him, but you know our guest a lot better. So without further ado, go ahead, introduce him.
Sure. So our guest tonight is born, raised in Suriname until he moved to study abroad in the United States at the Phoenix State University. And we're talking about a serial entrepreneur, innovation investor, product engineer. And he's been really active, especially in the Caribbean. And he's you may have heard of PIEDATA a lot in the tech space surrounding hackathons, but who's the guy behind PIEDATA? It's none other than Sergio Pengel. And Sergio, I want to welcome you up here quickly while I continue. Um, I met Sergio, I think, a few years ago in the early days of the hackathons in Suriname. I don't quite remember the event, but it was one of the events in Torarica, Royal Ballroom. And we had a lot of international guests um, and a lot of Surinamese descent as well. So we had Sergio representing PyData, the Caribbean. Miguel Rodriguez just came back with Apura Networks to Suriname. We had Ryan Kopinski talking about AR, VR stuff. So it was really an interesting event, and you just connect with these people and you see the cool stuff they're doing abroad, and Sergio was one of those prominent figures. So uh, other than that, I don't remember much because it's just quite a few years ago. So if I missed anything, if you remember anything more clearly than me, Sergio, feel free to share. But without further ado, welcome to Social Convos. Hope you got your got hot beverage, and hope you're in for a fun time with us.
Hey guys, thank you so much for welcoming me here. I don't have a hot beverage, but I have a camber beer. It's close enough to our Suriname roots, so I'm super excited to be here.
Good, good. We love it. Hey, you're getting some shout outs in the comments already from Tevin, Foaka, Sergio Pega, Melukuyu. So some love coming from the comment section already. And I have to ask, because Diego mentioned the buzzword, how do you feel about the introduction using the phrase serial entrepreneur?
I've learned to adopt that over the past, I guess, few years mostly because I do find myself being in a few different adventures. I think most entrepreneurs naturally are serial entrepreneurs. They just don't want to say it or accept that term. But I think if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a true entrepreneur, you will have multiple streams of income. Thus, that means you may have to consider the different avenues of ventures.
So it's an okay term. Serial entrepreneur is just a term that kind of tells you're into many things.
Exactly. And you got to own it, right? You can't just be an entrepreneur and then doing something else on the side. You got to be a serial entrepreneur. It means you got to. That's all you do. So you got to own it.
So I
Awesome.
guess to kick it off, Sergio. So we know you've been born in Suriname and you have Surinamese roots, but clearly from your accent, it's very American. So let's get into that a bit. How
Yeah,
did you even get into the States and studying international business at Phoenix State University?
ja, wel, ik ben in Suriname geboren. Ik ben ook een Suriname, ik ben Pengel, ik ben ook Nederlands. Maar ik praat heel veel erg goed zakelijk in Engels, omdat ik ben hier gestudeerd, afgestudeerd. So it's misschien meer makkelijker voor mij om Engels te praten. So ik ga Engels praten even snel. But yeah, so I was born in Suriname. I know it's kind of funny hearing me speak Dutch, right? Because it doesn't come naturally to the ear. But yeah, I was born in Suriname. And I was born in Dr. Sophie Redmond. No, hoe zeg ik het weer? The main ziekenhuis. Hoe zeg ik het weer? Golly, ik forget it. Dr. Sophie Redmond straat.
Academisch ziekenhuis.
Academisch ziekenhuis. Ik was geboren in academisch ziekenhuis. But I was raised in Zorg and Hope. My mom died when I was 6 years old. Cynthia Elia, God bless her soul. And my mom, after my mom passed, my brother and I, one brother went to my mom's side, and my other brother and I went to my dad's side. So I actually was raised by a beautiful Surinamese teacher called Wilma Kreisberg. So for those who Surinamese know, and I just she gave me the fundamentals of life, and I tell you, since I was with her since 6 years old until about 14, it wasn't a day she didn't prepare me for the real world of preparing for America or learning how to cook or washing clothes or just even shopping. So all of the fundamentals are still embedded inside my blood.
Okay. Just quickly, you don't have to worry about it. We have a lot of people joining in. We even have Raul, welcome to the show, joining in from Fort Lauderdale. We have a lot of Surinamese outside of Suriname. But this show is in English, so you don't have to apologize. You don't have to talk broko broko Dutch. So don't worry about it at all. We're doing this full English because we also have people joining in from Asia and from the Caribbean as well. So don't even worry about it. So, but okay. So, at what age did you actually go to the U.S.? Did you go there for studies? How did you end up studying there? For those of you who don't know you that well.
Yeah. So my initial one, my dad lived in the United States. He left early. Was in the military years ago, and my desire was always like, I know it sounds crazy, but people who know me back then would always say, Sergio, you were going to go to the United States. I said it since I was a kid. And that's when I understood the power of, believing and speaking things into existence. Because at an early age, when I was 14, after, I studied here and my grandmother decided to move to Holland, I had a choice to go to Holland or go to the United States. And I wanted to pursue my education. I loved soccer at the time. And I made a few I used to watch all the US movies, and watch all the basketball games. So I was so in love with the idea of what America represented. And with the opportunity came, my grandfather, who's now passed, Walter Pengel, he essentially brought me to the United States. And we visited, and I overstayed my visit, and then I became a American later on. So it was really one of those kind of natural, shoot for the stars, take a risk. And I remember the first time I flew in. I'll tell you a funny story, and I'll really be brief. I remember the night I flew in to New York City, and it was probably back in '98. And I had a Walkman in my ear. My uncle Wendell, he kind of gave me the first song was the Lucky Dubé, one of my favorite artists still today. And I'm landing for the first time. Imagine a 14, 15-year-old kid, first time in a new country, and I'm seeing nothing but lights like everywhere, right? And it's at night. I'm landing in LaGuardia Airport, and I remember at that time I told myself, I don't know what this place holds. I just saw it in the movies, but I'm gonna make sure that I'll come back better than I'm coming in here. And that was like my first journey coming into the United States, only because of my parents, my grandparents wanted to provide me with a better opportunity.
Yeah, I see that as I think recurring team as well, like parents and the environment you grow up in, that um, they make it possible for you to get access to it. And I guess lots of people don't know about opportunities till they're kind of, pushed into it. So I guess you yourself were kind of drawn into it, but how did you like grab the reins from yourself once you've been there? Can you talk about that experience, and what hit you like stepping out of that airplane?
I mean, I don't know if you guys are ready for this, but I'm gonna keep it raw as possible. This is the social convo channel, so I'm gonna try to keep it as real as possible because it's the truth.
Just casual, just a social conversation. Go ahead. You can give us all the details.
Good. So, you know, my dad at the time, was dealing with some serious drug issues. So my traveling and coming to New York was for me to expect to see my dad for the first time at 14, 15, and I have never really met the man, right? Growing up. So when I landed, he wasn't there, but my uncles was there, right? So we kind of went to Pennsylvania, and I lived in Pennsylvania for a year or two. And I'm gonna tell you guys, it's nothing like the movies, right? If you ever lived in Eastern Pennsylvania in the United States, I mean it's below zero most of the time. There's snow everywhere, and it was like one of the most boring town in the world, right? It was my first experience of America. I'm dealing with diverse people, white people, people from different cultures, and they're looking at me, and the first thing they ask me, say, "Hey, man, where you from?" I said, "I'm from Suriname." Oh, you from Africa? I'm like, "No, man, I'm from Suriname." They're like, "No, you from," and then I had to, because my accent was so strong, I couldn't speak English really well, right? And the familiarity was more for Africans, so I became the Africa of Pennsylvania early on, and then later on, just kind of developing myself in the sixth grade, played soccer. I had an uncle. Well, actually, um, I actually my father at the time kind of came through rehab, and then I remember 2 years later he invited me to come stay with him in New York. Now I'm gonna tell you guys, New York, as you guys may think of the Big Apple, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. But living in East Bronx, New York, in the hood, right? My experience in the Bronx was I lived right by the Yankee Stadium. Anyone who knows 162nd and 42nd Street, it was one of the roughest parts of towns. I mean, you have Bloods, Cribs, homeless, drug. I mean, it was one of those places where you really had to find yourself in the realization that, oh, this is the part of the movie they show a little bit of while you're watching the TV, right? But I actually lived it, right? I actually have to walk through needles and go upstairs to the apartment buildings, to the point where my dad relapsed again at the time, and the eighth grade in high school, I was homeless. I became in America with no papers, no identity, in the eighth grade, and I was homeless. And the only thing that kept me going was I stayed in a building. It was a crack house, to be honest with you. It was a crack house. It wasn't the sweetest place. Slept on the floor for years, for months, almost about 2 years. But I went to school every day. I woke up every single day, walked through the snow, through a few areas that weren't so safe. But I went to PS 166. I remember like it was yesterday, and I attended school there. And the thing that kept me busy, guys, to be honest, is that I was in the choir, I was in a band, I was in a social club, I was in a business club. Anything you can find yourself into, I was there. And I remember my graduation in the eighth grade. I literally received like the most awards for every special organization you can think of, because I was probably one of the only ones participated in those. But I just learned that those were the choices I had to make between being on the block and participating in selling, drugs to survive, and versus really living the right path of going to school, getting my education, building skills, because I understood that this wasn't the end road for me, but there was a pathway to kind of get through it at the time. Stop me every time I go, but after that, I'm gonna tell you when the story changes a little bit for me. I had an uncle who lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And his wife at the time, called me and said, "Sergio, come down here. it's beautiful. It's Atlanta. And she said two things she should have never told me. She said, you got beautiful girls. I'm a young man. I'm 15, right? Beautiful black girls in Atlanta, Georgia, right? And you can drive, right? And I was like, you can drive?
Yeah.
I'm taking a train everywhere. It's cold. So I decided to take a train. To take a bus actually to Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm gonna tell you the story behind that, guys. And it's a true story. It was so bad in the area I was at. A week prior, on the basketball court, got in a big fight with a gang member, right? And it was tough, right? Went to his environment, and they knew my name. They were looking for me, everything. So when my aunt calls and said, "Come visit in Georgia, spring break, come visit in Georgia," I said, "All right, I'll come visit, no problem." Right? I had a lot of extra motivation to go because I knew I had friends who lost their lives. Right? It wasn't one of those kind of like, I'm going to beat you and fight in the street. These guys, they were ready, right? They were really the Latin Kings at the time. Were serious things in New York City. I don't know, but for those who lived in New York, it's real deal down there back in the early late 80s, right? It was real deal back then. And lo and behold, I came to Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm gonna tell you my first love in America. My first this is America, right? My uncle picked me up from the bus station, and we go to a gas station to get gas. And I tell you, we get gas. We get out the car. He gets out the car. He pumps his gas. He gets in the car and drives to the front to go pay for the gas. I said, wait a minute. You get to pump your gas first and then go pay for it? He's like, yeah, this is Atlanta. That's how we do it down here. I said, oh, I ain't going back. Forget that. I ain't going back. So I started, figuring out a way to stay here. And again, guys, this is full transparency. I have no green card. I have no papers. I have nothing at the time. I only have my Suriname passport, which is expired, right? I'm telling you, $1 and a dream will get you far, right? But I went to school, find a way to eat, everything. And with the first time I realized the schools that I went to in high school wanted to get my information. They asked me for my social security number. And I'm like, what is that? And they were like, well, you need this paper. And that's when the first time I started focusing on how can I sustain myself as a young man in the United States, because I don't have any parents. I've been homeless before. I don't want to come to a new state and fall again. So I started focusing on, okay, what worked for me was school was my pathway for sustainability as of now. Relationships were the ways for me to leverage myself in case I fall. And then work was the way for me to get capital so that nobody can ever tell me to get out your house. Right? That's one of my biggest things growing up, because I lived in so many different homes. It was easy for somebody to be like, hey, get out of my house. However, right? And it hurt me so bad. That's why I always wanted to buy real estate, buy land, because one of the things that I always wanted to say is, I own this, right? Nobody can tell me to get away from this. And those were my three motivations to get going.
Let's move from there, because it's almost a Fresh Prince kind of story. You got into a fight on the basketball court, and your auntie said, "Come here and live here." So it's great. We do have some questions, of course, about the extracurricular activities that you were talking about, but I do want to jump in. Devin, we're not going to answer unless Sergio quickly wants to answer. Are you related to Yopi Pengel and Winston Pengel?
Yeah, Winston is my dad. Yopi is a great uncle of mine. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Raul is joining in from both channels, from LinkedIn and YouTube. And Raul, don't worry about it. We'll get into the topic. It's social confoes. The first half hour is always story time, so don't worry. We'll get into the topic in the second part of this conversation. And also a shout out from Yetro, who's also joining in from Facebook. So Sergio, what's up? So Sergio, we're gonna skip a little bit about the university part, but what we do want to know is you went to the US at quite an early age, so you had your high school experience in the US as well.
Yep.
So about the extracurricular activities, like what is one thing you've been to acquire in all these extracurricular activities in high school? What's one thing that you would say I would love, I would love if that part of the institute, like outside of the studying at school, that would be also be integrated in the Surinamese educational system.
Hmm, that's a great question. You didn't prepare me for this one. Um, I believe the educational system as we know it is should change. In the United States, even as a foreign, considered to be a African American man, the educational system is not conducive for to accommodate different vast of personalities and preparing them into real world workforce or entrepreneurship. If there is one thing that I would change in Suriname is that I would extend the internship early on. That's the most tangible, simplest tweak I would do. Meaning, every student that would start a university, in order to move to the next step, you have to acquire 1 year of internship in a particular focus that you're doing. The next year, you do another internship in a different vertical. The third year, to do another internship in a different vertical. The reason why I say that is because I believe that uh, education is learned two ways, three really. But the first really way is hands-on experience, going out there and really doing it. You really realize quickly if you like it or not, right? Or what you like about it, what you don't like about it. The second way is by engaging with individuals who are already in the field, who are doing it every single day, and being able to ask those questions, get those hands-on experience as well. And I think the third one is the skill. I think the school system is not designed to teach you a skill. It's designed for you to become a robot, simply said, right? You're conforming into a system that says you can make a great employee. You can read documents that will, depending on your educational level, and you can then apply them in a structured way, and then you can do it over and over and over again for a comfortable lifestyle that allows you to come back the following day. So to answer your question shortly, I would implement an internship program within each graduate level of studies.
I think that's a fair point to point out, and I definitely see that from your story. Of course, all these extracurricular activities that you've done, you've basically learned the life skills that you would want in an internship through all those, choirs, organization, networking, taking the initiative, buying one thing to sell it just to survive. And that was basically your internship period. But I guess let's fast forward that even more.
Yep.
Did you, after that period, graduated from the university, did you immediately step into, I guess, this entrepreneurial space, doing your own business? Or was it like you want to feel out how it is to actually intern at a real corporate setting first? How did that go? And
Yeah.
then I'll quickly follow up with another question on that.
Sure. I graduated from the Fort Valley State University with my undergrad degree in international business. Prior to that, I played football for 4 years. 4 years. A three years captain, and we lost. I want to make note of this. We won our championship my senior year after losing for 20 years. Just got to throw that out there for my fellow Wildcats out there who may be chiming in. But essentially, while I was in college, I did two things really well. Every summer or every twice, a couple of times a year, I would go with a friend who would essentially go to all the big football games, rent out the entire strip, and sell food. So that's my first, touching money, right? Like thousands of dollars exchange, when I realized this man do 2 events twice a year, and he makes $250,000 doing 2 events twice a year. The rest of the time he's fishing when he's making different things. The second thing I did was I actually worked as well. So playing football and doing a college thing, I would either tutor other students, or I through parties. I actually was a night guy who I had a place called Dirty Iguana. Like it was a nightclub in Macon, right? And I would pack it out with students, right, after the game, because I saw the need for quick ways to so that was my first postgraduate entrepreneurship. Before my actual graduation, my university, Fort Valley State University, was really good at putting me in one internship that I liked. And I think that's what really made me realize the difference between entrepreneurship and corporate world. I did my first internship at Georgia Lottery. Georgia Lottery it's the biggest lottery system in Georgia, obviously, and I work at the headquarters. I was in HR. So I worked directly with the vice president, and I was like the HR director for all of the incoming new hires. And it was the first time I really learned, suit and tie and, working in a corporate setting. And I learned that hands-on experience of how to work a job, right? How to understand how corporate structures work, how HR system works, what protocols look like, how to operate within a certain settings, learning social behaviors, how to, quality control, all that good stuff that you learn in corporate America. I had a hands-on experience and kind of did that for a few months, actually, until they offered me a position that I, kindly declined because I wanted to pursue my education further, because I knew that wasn't it for me. There was something about waking up every single morning, going to some job, and doing extremely well. Like, people love what I do because I add value, but I'm dying inside because I'm too busy counting my ROI and I'm too busy counting my value. It was too much going on, where I started looking at how can I, improve myself in different ways. So I started working for another company, because again, guys, coming out of there, I don't want to be homeless, right? I want to have sustainability in myself. I started working as a general manager for a finance company, a CLA in the United States. And prior to that, and maybe your follow-up question is seemingly here, but prior to that, I visited Suriname for the first time after years of, I got my green, got my papers, everything. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back home. And that was the first time I came back home, because I could travel now, and was the first realization of the promise that I've made years ago. And I think that is when my entrepreneurship was born. Because when I came back, the first thing that I did was I started my first startup company. And that was called Derby Graham. I don't know if you got a follow-up question, Diego, but I can keep going.
Exactly. That's actually where I was going, because I listened to your prior interview not too long ago, and the same thing, you came here and that triggered it. And I heard a particular thing. You had your first startup, your first venture, and I want you to talk to us about how you've run the startup, basically almost, correct me if I'm wrong, were a millionaire on paper.
Yes.
But then things crumbled down, and then you had to pivot, and that was the start of the conception of PIEDATA. Can you tell us about that?
So, true story. This is probably 2014, 2015, 2016, in that time frame. I came back from Suriname, and the problem that I wanted to solve, that I saw, is that I have my card everywhere. I couldn't pay for anything because nobody accepts cards, right? Everybody wants cash. So I'm like, man, you got it. This is when Square had the card reader in America. Like, this when Square was first beginning. I was like, man, you crazy? I called my friend in China, and I white labeled Square readers. So I put Derby Graham on those, and then I built the application. It was really like a website that allows you to swipe the card, it runs the reader, and then it will do the exchange. So I started doing that started building the company, try to go out there in Suriname, try to build it. And I got a few phone calls that really weren't attractive. They, hey, you're not an accredited company. You can't make these kind of transactions. you got to be able to put yourself in a situation. So that's when I learned about gateways. I learned about banking systems. And I started realizing, okay, you know what? This is a problem not just in Suriname. You have it all across the region. So I started looking at avenues on how to really raise the capital to start becoming a financial institution to enable remittances or transactions. And I ran into after a few people, I ran into a former partner of mine. And the beauty about this strategic partnership is that she had a music streaming application called Derby Wire, right? So this streaming application at the time was titled in 2012, class quality, top notch, a platform where we even engaged with Sony. You can hear me, right? I'm coming in clear. Yeah, we engaged with Sony. I had 2 investors at the time that I brought to the table. We attracted 2 other investors that we brought to the table. So we had a cap table for about $2.5 million. We had investors who were doing the due diligence, loving the dynamic. We had several meetings. And I'm going to tell you guys, during that time, Diego, to your point, after months and months and months of building a startup, for the first time, I would spend weekly meetings in an office space with 2 investors, a co-founder, founder, and another investor. And we would talk about our funding strategy, right? For $2.5 million, right? Collaboratively. And we had Sony on the table. We had Sony meetings. I remember like it was yesterday. And I was coming home to my wife at night, and I would tell her, like, listen, man, we're gonna get rich, right? We're gonna be rich, right? Because there's no way this can go wrong. There's no way this can go wrong, right? We're having these meetings. These people who have the money committed to this, right? So we're good. On months and months of these meetings, on a Friday, we finalized the agreements. On a Monday morning, we're signing, and I'm a millionaire. That means my company, I have enough equity in a multi-million-dollar company that I could consider myself, I'm on my $1 million track as a co-founder. By Monday, we had a hiccup call stating that there were some technical due diligence that occurred that discovered that some of the IP that we own was licensed by a third party. And because of that, they wanted to get a stake in this venture, which diluted all of us significantly because they had the most unique solution at the time, which the co-founder had declared publicly or said anything early on. Otherwise, we could have, figured out a way to kind of get past that. So it became a battle of, are you telling the truth? Are you saying, can I trust you? Or investors like Sergio, we believe what you're doing, but we don't know we can do that. It became a tuggle match. And at some point, 2 of the investors pulled out. And on a Monday, I'm supposed to be a millionaire. On a Friday, I've invested thousands of dollars into a startup. Everything is gone. And I'm like, I had that feeling again in New York City, losing everything, being homeless, what I'm gonna do. Because I spent everything. I mean, I'm that crazy entrepreneur. I put my last rent. I fought my wife and told her, look, don't worry about this. You gotta take risks. I was those crazy, put it in. And I tell you, on Friday, I had to come back to her and say, honey, I'm sorry, but it's not gonna work out.
Speaking of risk, before you transition to the PIEDATA stuff, speaking of risk, I guess, did you ever, like, these experiences, how do you weigh in how much risk you take, and what's your
And did
process
it
behind it?
change?
Yeah.
And also, did it change throughout the years?
Great question. Yes, when you're a young entrepreneur, you're radical, and I was really, really radical. I'm still radical relatively, but I'm calculated radical, if that makes sense. Um, it, Diego, if I was in the same situation at the same time in the same environment, I would have done it again. Not knowing the outcome, obviously, but because at the time I was such a stickler for due diligence, I caught myself saying, I mean, you have investors who are senior guys who are like, yo, this is it, right? So there's no way you can tell me that we weren't on the right track. The problem that I had is that I wasn't, to answer your question, it was more so an experience that I had to learn in understanding how technology works, right? If it was a real estate project, or if it was a healthcare, it would have been a little different because it's tangible. I can go to the property, I can see it, I can go to the all that stuff. But because this is technology, if I give you an application right now and I don't show you the source code, behind the source code we're leveraging an API that is owned by somebody else, it's hard for you to really know that API infrastructure and who owns it and all that other stuff, unless you're a technical investor and you can request those at the point of investment. Meaning they won't even have a conversation with you unless you are in a position to acquire them for them to open the doors for you, right? So it was the education of understanding how contracts work, the education of understanding how business infrastructure works, and more importantly, what is intellectual property and what does it look like from a technology standpoint? And that was my first aha. Okay, now I understand what does it look like.
How would you define?
Is this something? I
wanna
want to
quickly-
know, Diego. I want to know: is this something we should be worried about when we talk about Surinamese entrepreneurship and tech entrepreneurship and intellectual property?
Yes. My last time in Suriname, it was the event. Oh my gosh, I forgot the event's name, themed event, but it was sponsored by IDB. And at that time, they had the same conversation around intellectual property in Suriname. And the question that I have, and I tell people all the time, if I am a Surinamese entrepreneur and I have a brilliant idea and I build the idea, right? And I try to patent it with the Suriname Patent Office, and I forgot the proper name of the Suriname version of it.
BEE, the Bureau for Intellectual Property.
Yes. I, in America, can look at that idea and say, oh, okay. And I don't have to change anything. I can file it by showing that I have some level of workability with the U.S. Patent Office. So the Suriname Patent Office doesn't have it's not considered accredited tied to the United States Patent Office. There are some ways around it that I think they're working with right now. But that's strike number one in terms of a problem. That means entrepreneurs are going to have to register their IP outside of Suriname, which dilutes the economic value of Suriname itself. One big problem I'm trying to solve, by the way. So secondly, I think if you don't register your IP and you build something phenomenal, then other companies in the region, and it's known to be, I'm gonna be a little raw here. People in Suriname always say, I don't want to stay. They're gonna food me money. I'm gonna hold it right here because I don't want to. And I tell you, that is they die with those dreams, right? We all have friends in Suriname who are like, oh my gosh, boy, if I had some of your intellectual, but because they're like this, technically because the culture made them be like this, right? Because so-and-so got the idea stolen by so-and-so because they pitched it to them and it was now they announced, you know the stories, right? We don't have to go down that road, right? But because of that, it depletes and crushes the innovative ecosystem in Suriname and in the Caribbean, if you will, because we as an ecosystem are not able to rightfully own intellectual property that would be registered and developed in Suriname.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you brought forward, because that's always a very touchy area, and
Yeah,
especially for with music, with ideas,
yeah,
with inventions. If you don't register it outside, because you're basically, it applies to the jurisdiction you operate in.
yeah,
And the way I see it at this scale, I think the Caribbean as a whole is very fragmented in that sense.
exactly,
So it makes it harder for each individual in each individual country to be able to compete in a world stage.
exactly, exactly. And that's the problem, not only in Suriname, but most other Caribbean countries have the same issues. I see Jamaica and Bahamas and Barbados, in my opinion, are the ones who are trying to find their footing into developing the IP system. I think, one of my recommendations to the institutions in Suriname is that the Suriname should establish an organization in the United States or the Cayman Islands. This institution is owned by the Suriname Registry, whatever. And then when you file United States, which is globally recognized, but that tide will still be locally recognized as well, while we're catching up from infrastructure stuff. That way, the innovation or the new technology that are coming up are not left behind, right? They essentially are able to be recognized globally.
I have a bit of a different take on this, though. Not necessarily different as in completely different, but what the stage we're moving at, and I'm gonna use your example of the company that you were a millionaire, and then basically the judicial system kind of screwed you over, because in the end, if the other party has better paid lawyers and they are more familiar with the law and these kind of laws, you just lose it in court. You can fight them and lose all your money because you try to fight them in court.
Yeah.
And that's what we have with all these big companies. I'm not even talking about the Disneys, but anywhere in that level. So you basically have to consider two things. In the end, what people want is either you go for the biggest, we go for the Disneys, the Facebooks, even Netflix is experiencing that coming up. How much like Disney and the big corporations are fighting Netflix to keep them small enough that they can control them. Because if Netflix blows up and becomes on their level, it's over for them.
Yep.
So that's one route. So and Surinamese people like to be part, and not only Surinamese people in general like to be part of the winners. So of course we're gonna stay on Facebook and WhatsApp. I mean, we all had the struggle here. Yeah, we're gonna go on Signal. I keep laughing till this day. It's actually been 2 months already. So I want to ask all the people that say we're gonna move from Signal and we're never gonna use WhatsApp again. I want to ask those guys, how's that going for you at the moment? So either you go to the biggest, or you come up with a niche concept, a really big niche concept, which works perfectly for your niche, and a big company from outside is not able to touch it because it's so much embedded to the culture that people locally want to use it, and they don't want the big international version. Am I saying something here that you can work with?
Yeah, you can. And I love what you said. And the way to take it even further, most companies in the United States who have something significantly proprietary do not get a patent or a trademark. The reason why is because you have to declare the underlining of what you have in order to register it. Once you declare it and it's public information, then the other parties know what's under the hood. So until you get to a certain scale, then you can register it and patent it. So that's a lot of companies are doing that route, to your point. And I think that's a fair route. But I think from a smaller company in Suriname, you are absolutely correct. The focus, I'm careful here. Here's why I'm careful. If we found, because we're 90 98% tropical, right? In Suriname. If we found a particular frog that has this enzyme only in Suriname that helps to fight COVID, that is a product you only can find in Suriname. In that case, it's proprietary enough to where you want to kind of register it in an environment where you can race to the gold, so to speak. But if I'm gonna build this Facebook for Suriname, don't waste your time trying to go get a patent. Just like you said, have a niche, find out what kind of Facebook for Suriname you want to build, and then double down on that.
Awesome. Yeah, just to quickly go through the comments real quick while we move on. As you are talking, Gregory said radicals changed the world, and he loved, I guess, the idea how radical and I guess mad you were to go all in. Devin says he'd rather die than share his ideas which can be used by the wrong hands. Well, mixed feelings about that, but to
He's a
each their
radical.
own, of course.
He's a radical.
And then to move on quickly to the founding of PIEDATA and how that pivoted. So Sergio, Raul asked here, is Sergio the founder of PIEDATA? So after that story, after that crumbled down, how did you conceive PIEDATA and what does PIEDATA stand for?
Sure. So I'm gonna start with the latter question. PIEDATA stands for performance, image, and exposure are the three most common success principles that promotes innovation and creates innovation, promotes development. So how we started in PIEDATA, and we believe that data is the number one commodity in the world. So that's why we really value data. And I'll have another session on the performance of your work, right? How hard you work only accounts for 10% of success. The image of how you perceived, who you know, how people know you, from a culture, your ethics, your brand is 30% of the value, and exposure, who you know, who knows you, is 60% of the value. So I look at everything from a pie glass because I like to understand what really matters, and it's from a successful principle. But how we started, after I spent all my money on this $1 million startup, I had my rent money left. And it was I remember it was $1,200 at the time. And I didn't know how to make it up to my wife. A week prior to this announcement, remember Friday, we're signing. I reached out to my godmother, who happened to be the Secretary General at the time for CANTO, to say, hey, I want to come back to Caribbean to help really present this new payment system. Give me a spot to speak on stage. I'll pay whatever. So she said, oh yeah, come on. So on Monday or Thursday, she calls me and says, Sergio, are you still coming? I got you on Tuesday to present. I'm sitting here like, I just lost $1 million deal. I'm what I'm gonna talk about? Like, it's done. Then I thought about it. I said, when one door closes, this is when failure in my past was always followed by success, only because I couldn't stay there. So I always remembered, heck, I can't go lower than this. I'm gonna lose my place. I had my daughter wasn't even born there at the time yet, so I had no kids. I said, my wife and I are gonna figure it out. If she's with me, she's gonna ride or die, right? I'm that radical, right? You married me, right? You told you we're in for the long haul here. So I made it up. Yeah, I know.
I recognize some of that.
So I said, I didn't even tell her what happened, but what I did was I bought 2 tickets to the Bahamas with my last money. So I said, honey, I'm sorry, but we lost the deal. It's not gonna go. What do you mean? I don't even want to talk about it. We lost the deal, but listen, we're gonna go to Bahamas. All right. So I'm going to Bahamas. So now I'm in Bahamas. I'm in the room at the CANTO event, I'm seeing the Telesur executives. At the time, he had Derek Curry, who was representing. He was the chairman at the time, really crushing the game. This is when Derek Curry was was prime. He was changing not just Suriname, he was changing the region, right? He was preparing to really develop an ecosystem that would flood the gates of Suriname. T-Mail was live at the time, and he had people from the Bahamas, a lot of executives. And I remember it was a young man at the time called William Mahler was on stage. He was the only young guy there, right? So you're at a resort, nice place, all the executives, and there are really only any kids unless the executives brought their child to the event, right? But this is a guy with a suit. He's presenting on stage, young cat. So I'm in the crowd. I have nothing to present because my old company just died. I can't go on stage and lie to these people. So I said, you know what? I went on stage. I said, you know what? My last startup, we had some challenges. Here's the story. But the problem that I see in this room is that me and William are the only young people here. And you guys are making decisions that affect us, and we have no say in the room. What if we can get more young people involved in making decisions that allows us to be more proactive and be inclusive, because we're keen to technology. First, I'm gonna tell you, Derek wasn't my fan at first. He wasn't. It was William, not William. Oh my gosh, my brain, out of Bahamas, is gonna come to me. Oh my gosh, William. First name.
It'll come to you.
Yeah, it'll come to me. And he's the one who said, "Serge, I believe in you." Before EJ Saunders, who was our first investor in Suriname, he was the one who said, "You know what? Write a proposal and submit it." And I'm gonna tell you, the decision was, when I talked to William Mahler, I asked William. I said, "William, you got an award. You got $1,000. You got on stage to present. What happens next?" And he said, "Nah, that's it, Serge. I'll go home." Leon Williams, that's his name. It's coming back to me. Leon Williams. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna go home. And I said, what if we can come every year? What if we can come to this event every year and they're gonna listen to what you gotta say? He said, "Man, I'm open to what you gotta say." So, and I met a few other people, like at the time, you had Giano, who was the videographer for CANTO at the time, and you had Jamie, who was she was working at the with CANTO at the time with the administrative. And I kind of brought the young people that I saw at the time together and said, "Hey, what if we come together and work along with telecommunication executives to push forward mandates like don't shut down WhatsApp?" They were talking about shutting down WhatsApp, John. Can you believe that at the time, right? Don't shut down WhatsApp. Embrace it, and let's be at the cutting edge and building solutions together. I wrote a proposal, got a few no's, went to the board twice, presented twice, and I got one chance to come and present it in Suriname. Mind you, the next CANTO event happens to be in Suriname. So that's the first time we came to Suriname, brought some of the top executives from all around the world. At that time, I really talked to the whole T-Mail team, saw what they were doing down here. So we wanted to kind of bring in a support ecosystem from a diaspora to help educate, inspire, educate, and sustain Caribbean innovation. That was PIEDATA, how it's born.
I want to actually quickly follow up on that. After you, I guess, proposed it, brought it here, presented it in CANTO here,
yeah,
what was generally the reception, and what's the current state on how that's going?
Great. So at that time, it was literally, say it, right? What are these young guys here? What are you going to talk about? We had a few executives that were like, "Oh man, this is awesome. We need more young people involved in decision." And we had a few old dogs who were like, you can put it on the political spectrum or you could not, but it had both sides, right? And at the event, there were three things that I saw in the behavior of the people. One, they didn't realize how much we knew, because we had speakers like Ryan Kopinski, Miguel Rodriguez, right? We had really strong like guys who come on there presented. Gianna was crushing it on stage, right? So we had really strong individuals who were from the region who came back who were saying, hey, no, we can do this, right? We invited some executives as well to come speak. And it really brought light to locals that are stating that maybe we can support an environment where young entrepreneurs like had the T-Mill. That's when T-Mill was hot. That's when T-Mill was the #1 acceleration program or incubation lab in the Caribbean, right? I'm telling you, research done at the time. And we did the event, got our first investor, EJ Sounder from Domosimo Sancos. Shout out to EJ for giving me my first yes. He's the first guy who came to me. I gotta pause real quick because I want to tell you something about the people who are listening. EJ Saunders, he's done well, but I'm gonna tell you what he's done for so many other entrepreneurs in the Caribbean. He saw our vision and supported it not just by giving us form, but putting his money where his mouth is year after year after year in developing and giving us opportunity to put an ecosystem together. We went to the Bahamas, we went to Jamaica, we went to Trinidad, we went to different islands, Barbados, and we hosted events, hackathons, acceleration programs there. And we just had an idea, guys. PIEDATA started prior to us becoming a business. We started with just an idea of bringing in together the best innovators and developers together to build solutions. So we had hackathons, which was our business model at the time. Essentially predicated around bringing in engineers and developers, put them in a room for 3 days, only bathroom and food breaks, and they gotta build something in a short period of time. What we learned at the time was it was so much more needed after the hackathon in order to build a product and sustain a product. But we learned that last year when we launched Sonar, which was the first disaster management emergency communication solution, where I said, radical hat on again, I ain't doing nothing else. We're going to double down on this. This is going to work. Sonar is going to be it. And Diego, Jean, I'm telling you, man, I have been through 8 different islands. I have talked to the highest and the lows. And it's such a hard experience to actually get funding for a startup that we burned out. I mean, I lost everything again. I mean, again, radical, flying my team, going here, flying, going there. I mean, and again, going all in. And what I learned differently to your question earlier, John, the difference between my first radicalness, second radicalness, is knowing when it's time. At some point, you're gonna have to pivot, right? Move on. And because the solution wasn't going at the pace that I wanted to and needed to, because I can support my teammates financially, also just from a social, we were dying, right? It became toxic. You've been in those relationships when you've been toxic, right? I'm partially to blame, right? From a leadership, had to learn how to deal with. Everything was sweet for years. Now we got to deal with controversy, how to deal with teammates trying to leave, and it was toxic. But the one thing that I tell you that I did differently this time is that I learned that in order for you to move to the next stage, you have to, in order to grab the next hand, you got to let go of the old hand. And one of the hardest decisions that I had to make was to put Sonar on the shelf, let my team, we all separated, gave them the blessings. And then I started focusing on supporting my family and building a business. And the nights of being in the hackathon rooms, then the traveling and meeting with the developers and understanding the development cycle helped me to develop the PIEDATA who has now became a development agency who is designed for developing solutions, whether it's websites, mobile applications, SaaS products for some of the biggest celebrities in the United States, medical offices. We've been really, really blessed to have a vast part of customers to help to develop them into the digital space. So that's how we became here, and that's how we've been able to maintain into PIEDATA. And now we'll move on to the next phase whenever you're ready, Diego.
Yeah, I just want to quickly ask about, at this stage with Sonar, you had, I guess, greenlit investment. You had some yeses. So aside from the team, how do you deal with investors, people who have a stake in you already? Because that's even deeper. How do you, I'm not sure how many digits we go with there, but how do you,
For Sonar,
how do you own that?
Yeah, for Sonar, there is nobody who put more money in than me, first of all. Second, the team at the time who needed to build the solution couldn't get to the MVP, right? So we were pitching Sonar without having a fully functioning product. To raise money to finish the product, we had the developers, we had a team, but we didn't have a fully functioning product at the time. The development team that won the hackathon, who was supposed to build the MVP, they couldn't get to the MVP. So what I did was, I built the MVP, right? I was so desperate to raise money that, and I'm getting my toxic risk, right? I'm just giving you the good and the bad of Sergio, right? And I learned from that experience as well. But my desperate to success was so relevant at the time that because I wanted Sonar to succeed so bad, I didn't wait for the other team to finish it. I gave them a time frame, and they couldn't finish it in the time frame. So I utilized a no-code platform for the first time to build the Sonar MVP. And that was my first introduction of, oh, okay, it's over now. And that was like 4 years ago.
So yeah, you actually took it out of my mouth. It's exactly where I wanted to go with the no code. Because here's the thing: I've been part of hackathons. And usually you build stuff. You got all these technical people. You got these engineers building code, complicated stuff. And in the end, what's being pitched is some fancy mock-up. This is how it's supposed to work. It's the idea. That's how most of the hackathons were won. I've been part from support teams. I've been part of hackathons. And that's how you just get over the finish line.
You're right.
So what I want to ask now, MVP for the people listening is minimum viable product. And this is what you got to have to, test it out, find product market fit. Correct. So you, Sergio, as I guess, not that technical person, you're the idea guy, you're running the business. How, first of all, can you define what no code is for the people who have never heard about it? And how were you able to get to that MVP stage at that fast pace?
When you have a family to support, you become very resourceful. As a young man, my first child, knowing what I put my family through in the past, I had to figure out a way to make money. What I also experienced is that I had developers who knew how to build things, but they need money to build it. So I was stuck because I knew I knew how to build it, but I couldn't code. I couldn't write Java or Python or, a Ruby, right? I couldn't write. I didn't go to school for that. I got my undergrad in business, right? So I started developing no-code solution for a couple of small friends of mine, making $500 to $1,000 per application, utilizing a platform like Business Apps to build my application. And I essentially developed it early on, went to Shout'em, built other applications on Shout'em, and I started developing these solutions that will cost enterprise level $5,000-$10,000 to build from scratch at the bare minimum. I was able to sell it for $1,000 cheaper, but essentially manage it better, provide more service, support the founder or the company better. It had all of the bells and whistles you would need. I just didn't have to pay a bunch of money and a bunch of developers and time to do it. So no code is essentially I'm trying to explain it to you for non-technical and technical people in simplest way. It is an environment that uses GUIs, right? We call it GUIs, that essentially are visual elements that are programmed already for you. So for example, when you're writing code, you want lines of code, you're going to have to give the computer instructions to start something, to finish something in this particular format, whether it's front end or back end. These GUIs are already written for you. In fact, most developers who develop now, real coders, use this already, but they just use the actual code script to put it into their code. They don't. Most developers right now, you ask any developer who really programs right now, I can't find out one programmer who wrote every single line of code. I can't find that one. You know why? Because if there is some form of, you're always going to have one who's going to come in the chat like, hey, Serge, come on, that's me. I'm waiting for you. Come on in, right? But most developers would essentially utilize scripts to integrate with the open source solution, to integrate within their software, customize it a little bit, right? Make some adjustments to provide it. So with no code, it essentially gives you those visual elements where it used to be very drag and drop. So we're not talking about Wix, right? Or Webflow, which is like, you take it in slash and, right? It had no logic. It had no data, right? Those were the first early ons of no code solutions. However, since 2019, 2020, particularly 2020, no code has evolved significantly. Why? Because AWS, Amazon Web Services, enabled different instances that allowed you to have micro-level services, which enabled agencies to build no-code solutions for anyone to be able to utilize those pre-written codes, then customize their own logic while managing their infrastructure that sits on the same server like AWS than any other platform that's in the cloud pushed. So essentially, the programmer who spent 6 months writing code to push their code from their server to the cloud is doing the same thing the person who's no code, who took 2 weeks to build it, push to the cloud, because they both sit on the cloud now anyway. They have the same infrastructure security. They have the same enterprise. I manage my data. I can pull my data. I can integrate any API I want, right? So no code 2020, the pandemic has promoted what we call citizen-centric development. It's no code.
Hey, so it's funny because I know quite some developers, and it really went from 10 years ago. No, I want to write my own code. To like, okay, we're going to copy these 2 lines of code because it's just easier to, can we white label this? I think for people, it's interesting to know that this isn't just something that's happening with app development or coding. It's happening with content creation as well.
Yes.
Because like 20 years ago, television productions, and now the same productions are done with a mobile phone. And basically, there are two kind of people who are really profiting from this, because the people who know how to write serious code, they of course get paid a lot of money because they really know how to code. And then you have the the people who can commercialize it and take this no code and make it into something that actually solves a problem or brings value to the end consumer, and they
Exactly.
profit from it as well.
Exactly.
Which basically, I mean, we have a lot more questions, but we already passed the hour mark. So we want to close down with one final question, and it kind of it comes around to things you have mentioned before, because we briefly spoke about MVPs, minimal viable products, and we also spoke about no code. And you especially specifically told us, since the pandemic, since 2020, no code, it's the access, getting to all these solutions online has become so much easier. So if I'm a young aspiring or a young starting entrepreneur in Suriname, and I have an idea, like, what advice could you give them through the process of finding an MVP? Like, what are the minimal standards for an MVP? And where can I search for no code solutions that I could actually start my business from home?
Great question. So if you're watching this video, listening to this podcast, I want to invite you to come to nocodecaribbean.com. Nocodecaribbean.com. We're at the brink of launch. Go ahead, Sean.
Now I'm gonna write it down while you speak. We're
Yeah,
gonna put it on
yeah.
screen for you.
Nocodecaribbean.com is an online academy that allows you to register and do exactly that. You'll be able to, one, learn um, tools and resources on how to build it. Two, you'll be able, yes, thank you. You'll be able to um, join our cohort. We're launching a cohort in Suriname here very shortly. We've been working and speaking to a lot of institutions in Suriname as well. So if you're in Suriname, we work closely with Rajiv, who is one of our Suriname ambassadors down there. So we're really excited about having him kind of spearhead the no code in Suriname. We're actually launching Trinidad in last week. We're kind of doing our first cohort in Guyana as well. So I want to invite you to to join our community, because you're going to be able to. I know people who are in our group chat this morning alone who are going crazy because they're like, "Yo, I've been looking for this," and you finally kind of like this. We have a sharing culture. We want to give you as much information. So if you're a young person and you went to the website, you signed up, there are 3 platforms that I like to give away. My favorites, why I use them a lot. Again, I gotta warn you, they are not just drag and drop. They're not the Wix builder or the Squarespace. Don't think of it like that. I have an AWS API. I'm built. I've managed a lot of interesting things with these no-code solutions. So just please, the misconception, have an open mind. The first one is Figma. 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 Figma.com. Figma, in my opinion, is so powerful. It's the most embedded solution with a lot of different third parties, because you can essentially do your workflows, your designs, your graphics, everything, and they're reusable all the way down to the productions in Figma, right? So highly, highly recommend Figma. The second one for development, and it's world renowned now for a lot of developers, called Bubble, Bubble.io. Bubble is one of my personal favorite. Why? And I recommend it to any young no code or non-technical founder, is because, one, it's free. It's free entry. You can build a website tonight on Bubble for free. It have the Bubble icons on it, but you got a website for free, right? Doesn't matter, right? And I'm not talking about just informational website. No, you can have an entire structure. They have a nonprofit package too. Hint, hint. Second, it is the most integrated no-code solution right now, because I can basically integrate I can do from Google APIs to voice recognitions. I mean, I can build I can integrate any solution with it. The third one, there's 2 of them that I like, is AirDev, which is a premium version of more of the data oriented no code, right? If you're trying to have a table and structure, you're tired of using Excel spreadsheets, right? You're tired of doing that. That is really, really beneficial for you to utilize. And then if you're like into IoT solutions, it's a platform called Tuya, Tuya. That's really good for Bluetooth or machines or hardware components to integrate with them. So, but to make it easier for your audience, I would definitely start with those two. Now, listen, I use other ones, right? I use a lot of other ones. I have a friend in the United States called Nix Code. She's a female founder, one of the only minorities who are leading, have their own platform, and you can go on Nixcode right now and build you a mobile app right now, right? It's gonna cost you about $200-300, but guess what? You save $10,000 in development down the line, and you can get to your MVP faster. You can learn if it works, and if it doesn't work, you iterate and move on. So I hope I answered your question by giving at least a few key platforms.
No, that was gold, definitely.
Thanks a lot.
And yeah, I've noticed the same trends. Well, actually, like February, that opened my space. And yeah, Rajiv Hiralal was on Social Confoes before as well. So great to hear that you're working with him. And
he's
definitely
great.
some things people can look forward to. But with that being said, there's so much more we can talk about, but we've hit time. And I think we definitely would like to, as things develop, have you on in a future episode. But currently, you've already mentioned you're spearheading No Code Caribbean and things people can look out to. Where can people find you? What can people look forward to? And any final thoughts, you can lay them out now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, let me start off by saying thank you, Diego and John. I'm a huge fan of this channel. Believe me, right? Just trust me. You may not get all the accolades, your roses right now, but I'll give them to you guys while I can. And I commend you for the consistency in providing value and content that actually helps young people in Suriname and in the Caribbean as well. So thank you so much for this platform. You can find me or reach out at No Code Caribbean for our cohort. So in Suriname, we're launching this month. We're launching our first cohort. I really want to talk to my Suriname audience. If you're a young student, I know you've watched a lot of Jean's episode when it comes to sports as well, right? I want to tell you, this initiative, this cohort is for you, all right? I'm gonna dedicate as a serial entrepreneur to your success. If you're a female, right? I highly recommend women. I wanna talk to my female listeners right now. If you're a young woman between the ages of 18 and older, and you're looking of trying to learn a new skill so that you can make money right now, I invite you to go to No Code Suriname, sign up, register for our first cohort, because what we're going to do is we're going to allow you to learn in 8 weeks. You're going to learn how to utilize tools, what tools are out there, and then being able to program it. So at the end of the 8 weeks, you would know how to build the website. You would know how to build the application, and you won't have to learn how to know code, right? So I highly want to recommend you to come there. If you want to connect me on LinkedIn, the LinkedIn address is Sergio Pengel at LinkedIn. And I am super, super excited to come post-pandemic back into the region with this no-code movement. We're excited in Trinidad and other islands. We're really launching in those different parts of the region. But met de strana man. Ik ga altijd anders in een andere staat om dingen te doen en andere mensen te helpen. Maar voor de eerste ben ik echt serieus bezig om in Suriname te helpen. So als jij in Suriname bent en je wil iets vinden om jezelf beter te maken, alsjeblieft om jou te helpen. Ga naar No Code Caribbean, sign up, and let's build the future together. The goal is to educate 100 female in Suriname by the end of this year. That's my strong, bold goal. And I know by doing that, Suriname as a whole will move up in the ecosystem as a technology leader as it should be.
Thank you for that bold call out, and we're here to help keep it accountable. We're
Yes. Just also the comments. Marvin says top boats have, but also I want to point out because we'll give a shout out to one of our female listeners, Tanya, who says she's a no coder as well. So shout out to Tanya for also dropping in and being one of the females who dropped the comment on today's episode. So
Thanks,
that's
Tanya.
awesome.
That's
Thank you.
awesome, Sergio, and appreciate you being on. We'll drop all the links. We'll follow up after this to get all the links. Put the links in the description for all the listeners.
Yes.
Guys, this episode, if you've missed it, if you got friends who've missed it, definitely people interested in no code, in technological developments. This episode will be released on Saturday on all streaming platforms as weekly. So share it to them. Comment. This helps us, reach more people. The more people we can impact, the better. But take your step. And with that being said, thank you, Sergio, for tuning in all the way from Miami right now, right?
I'm in Miami, yes.
Yeah. And definitely, with that being said, Jean-luc, roll us out, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yeah. So quickly, just like Diego said, the episodes will be out. Feel free to rewatch the episode. Gregory said I won't be able to join, so I'm watching the follow up episode. Same goes actually for Raul. Sorry, I'm pulling out the wrong comment for Raul saying like I have to go, but he will listen to the recordings afterwards. So that's an awesome initiative, and that's what Tanya says. And
Tanya,
I think we can definitely close it off.
Yes. Tanya,
Yes, go ahead, Sergio.
No, I was gonna say shout out to Tanya because I love my female founders. So Tanya, you're definitely welcome. We got some good stuff for you, so we'll connect offline.
Awesome. Hey, Diego already said it. We'll be back next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. Many thanks to Sergio. Thank you. And as always, this was Social Confoes. See you next Tuesday at 9. Bye bye.
Thanks, guys.